Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Thoughts. My name is Carolina, and I'm here with Reverend Doc. Today, we're in a different locations. How are you, Rev?
I'm doing good. I'm just trying to stay one step ahead of COVID. It seems like so many people have it. So I think this is a good idea for us, Carolina, to be doing this remotely so that there's not a lot any unnecessary contact or interaction. Let's stay safe, and I hope everybody out there is staying safe also.
So today, I wanted to talk about baptisms,
Good.
and I would like to know about your own baptism. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I'm glad you asked because it certainly is unique. It is not typical at all, and it really has shaped the way I think of baptism. But we have to go back 30 years. Okay, so everybody go back in time. You know, sometimes when they go back in time, there's those waves on the TV. So I was applying for my first ministerial license. I had finished a couple of years of seminary, and I was going to enter the church and start to do some what they called field work instead of classroom work, and actually do some ministerial stuff. And so in order to do that, I needed to complete a ministerial license with the denomination in order to be authorized to do things like baptisms, weddings, funerals, and so forth. They want to make sure that not just anybody's doing all those things. So I'm filling out the application, and I reached the line that says date and place of baptism. And I'm thinking, well, I was a little baby, I'm sure. So I can't possibly know what that was. So I called my father to see if he still had anywhere, I mean, a real shot in the dark, my baptism certificate, because I sure didn't. See, my mother had passed away long before this, so she was not available. And moms usually are the ones who keep track of these things. Dads are heads are elsewhere. So my dad says, "Well, I don't think I have it, but I'll look around and see." He called me back a couple days later and said, I've been thinking, you were never baptized." I'm thinking, well, I'll be darned. I was never baptized. All these years I thought I had. I had filled out different church applications where they'd asked about my baptism, and I just kind of guessed. I figured I was baptized. And so here I was about to apply to become a pastor in a church, and I had never been baptized. So lo and behold, I was baptized then. At the church I was serving as an assistant pastor, I was baptized on a Sunday morning right next to a little baby. So how about that? Well, that is certainly an unusual story. So, but it's got me to thinking. So what if my dad had died also, and there was nobody to tell me that I had never been baptized? I would have thought that I was. And I would have been going through years and years of ministry, now 30 years later, never having been baptized. And I asked myself, well, would that have made me illegitimate as a pastor because I hadn't been baptized? Would I somehow be missing something because I hadn't been baptized? And gets me to thinking what baptism might really be all about, because I had a very unusual set of circumstances. So it's got me thinking. So you're raising a good issue that really hits home with me in a way that probably very few other people or pastors could talk about.
Yes, that's definitely a very different story about a baptism.
Oh yeah,
Yes. So
sure enough.
why do we baptize people then?
So the reason we baptize, a couple of reasons. It's a rite of passage of the church. It's a formal action that we take that is intended to mean something. It's significant. And so on a personal level, what baptism is all about is the person is identifying with Christ, with Jesus. We say in baptism we put on the clothes of Christ. In other words, it's like wearing that uniform that identifies who we belong to. So that's at a personal level. At the corporate level, It's all about the initiation act into the church. We often will say that. That's why when we baptize, it's done in a church setting because it's intended to be this incorporation of the person, usually a baby or child, into the church. And it's also that initiation act. It's like this is the beginning of one's relationship with the church and in a public way with God. So that's one way to answer it. But here's another way. It is also, and this is where we get things a little bit, whether it's confused or we start to develop certain tensions where maybe we got to try to figure this out. Baptism is also about incorporating people into and authorizing them to do the work of Jesus that is continuing generation after generation. So by the reason that they wanted me to be baptized is because formally that authorized me to be a pastor. But anyone who's been baptized has the authority. Jesus said, all authority is given to me in heaven and on earth. Therefore, I say, go and make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's Jesus sharing his authority. So Carolina, because you've been baptized, you are authorized to conduct the work of Jesus through the church and in your life. It gives you authority. And if someone says, well, who says you can do this? And you could say, my baptism says I can do this. The church says I can do this. It's the authority that's been given to me. It's intended to be about discipleship. Baptism. It's about, this is saying you're authorized to be a disciple of Jesus. Remember what I said? Make disciples and baptize them. Because we believe in the priesthood of believers. That's one thing that's big in the Protestant church, is that all people are authorized to do the continuing work of Jesus. So to be baptized is not just an initiation act into the church. It's being authorized. And that's when I say there's tension, because we often baptize people with no expectation or insistence that they be disciples, that they actually carry out the work of Jesus. We just do it and say, okay, here's some water. You've gone through this. We'll sign the baptism certificate to say that you did this. But it's intended to be the start of a long life of discipleship. So, again, that's my long answer to your short question.
This is very, like, I'm surprised. I didn't know about this. So it means I could, next time we have a baptism, then I can do the baptism.
Yeah, as a
Instead
matter
of
of fact, well, you can do it alongside me. Hey, that would be fun. Actually, and our church's bylaws, Greendale People's Church's bylaws, do say, with regard to sacraments, that because we adhere to the priesthood of all believers, that any person, not just the pastor, can administer the sacraments. Sacraments being baptism and communion. So it's not just me. So everybody's authorized. But let me just say, see if I can do it in 1 minute. Priesthood of all believers. I think we need to recapture that in our day, not just in our church, but everywhere. Because most people think that the work of the church is done by the pastor, or the pastor is the only one who really counts. So if someone's sick and they want someone to pray, it doesn't really count until the pastor says it. But if someone needs prayer, there's nothing that stops anybody else from the church for praying for that person, not just administering the sacraments, but also taking on the role of ministry within the church. So we need to recapture that, I think, a little bit.
So now let's talk about what really happens in baptism.
Okay, so I'm going to answer that. Not everybody knows there's water and that there are people around and there are godparents and all that. So I just want to, what happens in baptism? I want to say, what does baptism mean? What's actually occurring when we do this baptism? So one of the things we need to realize is that when we use the word sacrament, which is what baptism is, sacrament for many people means it's a mystery. We can't see it, but we believe that there is something there. And the mystery is, what is God actually doing in this baptism? On God's side of this, what is actually taking place? And it remains a mystery. We don't know. We do believe and we proclaim that there is God's love and grace being shared and being given to the person being baptized. So that's what's happening on God's end. The grace of God enters the person and gives that person the grace and the power to do ministry. Now, on our side, okay, that was God's side. What's going on our end of the bargain? Here's another meaning of the word sacrament. Sacrament comes from a Latin word, sacramentum. Sacramentum. So if you're curious and want to look it up, you can Google this. Sacramentum was something that took place during the Roman times, and soldiers would make sacramentum to their commanding officer. What a sacramentum was a vow, an oath of allegiance, of loyalty. They say to their commanding officer, I hereby vow and I promise that I will follow your commands and I will do as you say, and I will be a loyal soldier and I will not abandon or desert my fellow Roman soldiers. This is my firm commitment. And they held them to it. If they broke sacramentum, it was a big deal. Not a good day for that soldier. So at our end, you know how we make vows? Do you vow? Do you promise to do these things? So on our end, we're actually making promises. We're taking an oath. This is a sacramentum where we are swearing our allegiance and our loyalty to Jesus and to actually carrying out this baptism. So on our side, it's about promises. On God's side, it's more about a mystery. That's what's happening when we do baptism.
Is it okay to provide baptisms for people who are not church members, just as a service for the community?
Yeah, that's there. We're back to the tension. To do this as a service to the community, we say that for many people, other churches will not baptize them because maybe they're not members of that church. In some cases, maybe the parents are not married and so forth. And in some churches, they would not baptize those babies. So we say we will baptize them because this is a service to the community, that we do not want people to be outside of the possibility of experiencing the grace of God. So it's our way of showing love to the community. That's a service we perform to the community. But one of the things that I think we have to struggle with the tension of, in doing a service to the community and to people, are we doing a disservice to Christ? People want that mystery aspect. They want that grace aspect, but not so much the discipleship aspect. And it takes both ends of what goes on in baptism. Baptism without a commitment to discipleship and to actually swearing and vowing allegiance to Jesus and to being determined to follow Jesus and to continue their life in the church is kind of doing a disservice to the church and to Christ. So it's that tension, it's like they say, well, God is love. You're right, absolutely. But the flip side to that is, what is God not? And the Bible says God is not mocked. Don't dishonor God. So on the one hand, we want the love of God. We want that mystery. We want that grace. But not so many people really want that discipleship and to really make that vow of allegiance to continuing this. And that might be it could be by some people considered, maybe that starts to border on mocking God and dishonoring the whole purpose of baptism, which is not just to receive the mystery and the grace, but also to vow to follow Jesus as a disciple. So it's a tension, and I don't think I've settled it. I think we will continue doing as we are doing at Greendale People's Church, but I do think it's healthy to struggle with this. While doing a service, are we also doing in some other ways a disservice? So let's think about that and talk about that.
And thinking about this, you say it's a commitment. then wouldn't it be better to get baptized when you're an adult?
Aha, that's what some people would say. Absolutamente. Because the child is not making that decision. And that if it does involve discipleship, then that should be done by somebody who can actually make that commitment to being a disciple. But that's why we have godparents. And that's why we ask the parents, do you intend on raising this child in the church? Do you intend to teach this child the word of God and pray for this child that they will become true disciples of Jesus? Usually we say that in the baptism liturgy. So, yeah, and so some people would, that's why in some churches they would definitely frown upon infant baptism because for them the discipleship part is more important. So, but in the year 2022, people are starting to lighten up about fighting over baptism because we're fighting over way too many other things. Why add baptism to it?
Yes. So is it okay if I get baptized twice? Because I was baptized when I was a baby. And what if
Yeah.
I now, as an adult, I make the choice too?
Okay. Now, again, we're back to different schools of thought. Some people would say if baptism was really about administering the mystery of God, the grace of God to this child or to this person, to say, well, you need to be baptized all over again is to delegitimate that original grace. And who are we to say what God does or doesn't do? A child baptized in a church, let's say the Catholic Church, and they come now and say, well, I was baptized in the Catholic Church. I want to be baptized in your church. And you have to say, well, do you really think that what took place in that baptism really was not the legitimate administration of the grace of God? And so in some schools of thought, they would say rebaptizing is inappropriate. In other cases now, and this is becoming much, much more prevalent, they will say, well, nowadays, as an act of pastoral care, sometimes people need a significant event in their lives, and baptism can be that for them. They did not make that choice as a baby. Now they want to make this firm decision and this choice as an adult. So we should not say, no, you can't, because that delegitimizes your original baptism. Now we do it out of an act of pastoral consideration for where people might be in their lives.
Do you have anything else to add about baptisms?
No, I really don't. We don't really talk much about it in the church. We just do it. And it's a good thing for us to be doing what we're doing now, Carolina. So I'm glad you raised this as a topic because I think it's informative and it really does get us thinking about things that maybe we should consider more often than we do.
Okay, Rev, thank you so much for another great Wednesday Thoughts episode. And then we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, Carolina, you stay safe, okay?
Thank you. You all too. And please don't forget to like this video and follow us on YouTube.
Okay, bye
Bye-bye.
now.